Harvard found that 76% of people avoid discomfort at all costs, yet the top 1% of performers do the exact opposite. What if everything you've been taught about avoiding pain is actually destroying your potential? In this video, we'll explore why Jordan Peterson and David Goggins both advocate for deliberate suffering as the secret path to an extraordinary life. The third principle, which will be revealed only at the end, explains why comfort is the silent killer of greatness. By the end, you'll have a practical framework to transform voluntary discomfort into exceptional strength. And wait until you hear about the suffering paradox. It completely changes how many people understand personal growth, and it might do the same for you. Our modern world is obsessed with comfort. Every advertisement promises an easier life, less pain, more convenience. But here's what's fascinating: our bodies and minds weren't designed for constant comfort. They were built to adapt to stress. According to research, 94% of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies faced significant traumas or adversities that they consider fundamental to their success. That's not a coincidence. As Jordan Peterson puts it, the meaning that sustains life in all its tragedy and disappointment is to be found in shouldering a noble burden. Think about that. Meaning doesn't come from comfort, it comes from voluntarily carrying a worthy load. Stop right now and ask yourself, what discomfort are you actively avoiding that could transform your life? Be honest with yourself. Here's a practical 15-minute exercise that many personal development experts recommend to break through comfort addiction. First, identify 3 specific discomforts you're actively avoiding right now. Maybe it's a difficult conversation, maybe it's waking up earlier, maybe it's pushing harder in your workouts. Write them down. Second, visualize the consequences of continuing to avoid these things for the next 5 years. Really see your future self having spent 5 more years running from these same challenges. Don't worry about doing this exercise perfectly. Just start. As Peterson would say, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. Consider the transformation of Theodore Roosevelt. Born a sickly, asthmatic child, his father told him, "You have the mind but not the body. Without the help of the body, the mind cannot go as far as it should." Rather than accepting this limitation, Roosevelt embraced deliberate suffering, brutal physical training, boxing, wrestling, hiking, transforming himself into the rugged symbol of strength we remember today. This video will explore what could be called the deliberate suffering framework. 3 powerful principles that explain why voluntary hardship is the fastest path to an extraordinary life. Peterson and Goggins advocate for this approach, but for completely different reasons that actually complement each other perfectly. The first 2 principles will change how you view challenges, but that third principle, it's the missing piece that explains why most personal development advice falls flat. But first, what did David Goggins discover during Navy SEAL Hell Week that most people will never understand about suffering? When David Goggins was going through Hell Week in Navy SEAL training, arguably the most brutal military training on Earth, he made a life-changing discovery. At the point where his body was screaming that it was 100% done, completely exhausted with nothing left to give, he was actually only at about 40% of his true capacity. This isn't just motivational talk. Neuroscience confirms this. The brain creates protective barriers that signal stop long before you actually need to stop. It's a survival mechanism designed to conserve energy and prevent injury. But in our comfortable modern world, these protective barriers kick in way too early. Take a moment and really consider this. What if your perceived limitations are only 40% of your true capacity? What would that mean for your life, your goals, your potential? This brings us to the first principle. The capacity to endure voluntary discomfort expands your zone of control. Jordan Peterson explains it this way: if you voluntarily confront the demands of life, you can decide when and where and how. If you wait until you're forced to confront them, then the who, when, where, and how are no longer under your control. Let's look at a concrete example. Michael Jordan was famous for his work ethic. After team practices ended, he would stay and shoot 500 more baskets. When everyone else decided they were done, he was just getting started. He deliberately chose discomfort when others chose rest. The results speak for themselves. Now ask yourself, what would be the equivalent of 100 more shots in your life? Where could you push just 10% further when your mind first says, enough? Here's a practical 3-step method called comfort expansion that many top performers use. First, identify your current limit in any area: physical, mental, or emotional. Second, voluntarily increase that limit by just 10% each week. If you usually run 2 miles, try 2.2. If you read for 20 minutes, push to 22. Third, document your expanding capacity. This is crucial because you'll begin to see the pattern of growth that comes from voluntary discomfort. Consider Eliud Kipchoge, the marathon world record holder who broke the 2-hour barrier. His training method wasn't about comfort. It was about progressive, controlled discomfort, pushing just beyond his limits, recovering, then pushing again, year after year. But here's the warning. Avoiding discomfort doesn't keep you safe, it makes you weaker. Studies show that 89% of people who consistently avoid challenges report severe dissatisfaction with their lives. Their comfort becomes their cage. As Goggins would say, you have to build calluses on your mind just like you build calluses on your hands. You have to fall in love with suffering. But what happens when discomfort becomes truly unbearable? The answer contradicts everything you've probably heard about personal development. When most people talk about finding meaning in life, they focus on happiness, fulfillment, and positive emotions. But what if that approach is backward? What if meaning primarily emerges from how we handle suffering? This is what many experts call the suffering paradox. And both PETERSON and Goggins have discovered it independently through very different paths. Take a moment and imagine 2 scenarios. First, a life with 0 challenges where everything comes easily to you. Second, a life where you've overcome significant obstacles through deliberate effort. Which life feels more meaningful? Be honest with yourself. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps, observed something remarkable. Prisoners who found meaning in their suffering were far more likely to survive. This wasn't just positive thinking, it was a fundamental psychological mechanism. As PETERSON puts it, the purpose of life is not happiness but meaning. And meaning is to be found in the confrontation of suffering. This brings us to the second principle. Anti-fragility of the mind develops only through appropriate stressors. Nassim Taleb coined the term anti-fragile to describe systems that get stronger when stressed. Your muscles work this way, they need stress to grow. But so does your mind. Look at the Navy SEALs' SERE training: survival, evasion, resistance, escape. It deliberately exposes trainees to extreme psychological pressure, not to break them, but to show them they can withstand far more than they thought possible. After experiencing this controlled suffering, their tolerance for all forms of stress increases dramatically. Ask yourself, what could you endure if you knew it would permanently transform your mental capacity? David Goggins embraces suffering as a competitive advantage. He says, most people want to avoid pain. I seek it out. This isn't masochism, it's strategic. In a world where most people run from discomfort, the person who embraces it has an immediate edge. J.K. Rowling wrote Harry Potter while battling depression and extreme poverty. She later said those struggles forced her to strip away everything non-essential and focus only on what truly mattered to her. The adversity didn't crush her creativity, it refined and focused it. As Brené Brown discovered in her research, vulnerability is not weakness, it's our greatest measure of courage. The contrast between avoiding discomfort and embracing it becomes stark when you project into the future. Close your eyes for 5 seconds and really feel what your life would be like 10 years from now if you continued avoiding challenges. Now compare that to a future where you voluntarily embrace difficult but meaningful struggles. The difference is profound, isn't it? But this raises a critical question. Is there a point where deliberate suffering becomes destructive rather than constructive? The third principle answers this fundamental question. Not all suffering leads to growth. There's a crucial distinction between constructive suffering that builds you up and destructive suffering that breaks you down. Jordan Peterson makes this distinction clear. There's a difference between carrying a heavy burden and being crushed by it. The key word is voluntary. When you choose the struggle, when you face difficulty on your terms rather than having it forced upon you, you maintain control over the process. Take a moment to reflect. How do you know when you're crossing the line between growth-producing stress and self-destruction? The answer lies in understanding what developmental experts call the Transcendence cycle, a 4-phase process that converts voluntary hardship into personal transformation. First, there's voluntary stress. You deliberately challenge yourself beyond your comfort zone. Second comes adaptation. Your mind and body respond by becoming stronger, more capable. Third is recovery, the essential phase that many people skip. Without adequate recovery, stress becomes damaging rather than strengthening. Fourth is expansion. Your capacity grows and what once seemed impossible becomes manageable. Consider Wim Hof, the Iceman, who voluntarily exposes himself to extreme cold every morning. The initial discomfort is intense, but the adaptation process has given him remarkable control over his immune system, something scientists once thought impossible. As former Navy SEAL Jocko Willink says, discipline equals freedom. By imposing voluntary hardship on yourself, you ultimately expand your freedom rather than limiting it. This brings us to the third and most powerful principle. Transcendence emerges only when we voluntarily embrace what we fear most. PETERSON explains it this way. The hero voluntarily enters the darkness, the unknown, and there finds the treasures that the rest of us, cringing in terror, desperately need. Look at Oprah Winfrey's transformation. Born into poverty and abuse, she didn't just overcome these challenges, she transformed them into fuel for her mission. She didn't just survive trauma, she transcended it, using those experiences to connect deeply with millions. Imagine yourself voluntarily facing your greatest fear. Not being forced into it but choosing to confront it. How would your life change if that fear no longer controlled you? When integrating all three principles, a powerful system for personal transformation emerges. First, expand your capacity through deliberate discomfort, pushing past that 40% rule. Second, develop anti-fragility by seeking appropriate stressors that make you stronger. Third, achieve transcendence by voluntarily confronting your deepest fears. David Goggins embodies this integrated approach. He transformed himself from an overweight exterminator with a profound fear of water into an elite Navy SEAL and ultramarathon runner. His secret wasn't special talents or advantages, it was his willingness to embrace suffering that others avoid. Ask yourself, what would you attempt if you knew that you couldn't fail but could only learn? We've explored the three principles of the deliberate suffering framework. First, the capacity to endure voluntary discomfort expands your zone of control, pushing past the 40% rule that limits most people. Second, anti-fragility develops only through appropriate stressors, transforming your relationship with challenges. Third, transcendence emerges when we voluntarily embrace what we fear most, converting our greatest obstacles into our greatest strengths. As Jordan Peterson reminds us, the person who voluntarily confronts the dragon gains the gold. The person who doesn't gets eaten. By choosing our struggles rather than having them forced upon us, we become the authors of our own story rather than victims of circumstance. The path of deliberate suffering isn't easy, but neither is a life of unfulfilled potential. Every time you choose voluntary discomfort over easy comfort, you're building the mental and emotional strength that will carry you through life's inevitable challenges. Remember what David Goggins discovered during Hell Week. Your perceived limits are nowhere near your actual capacity. And as Peterson teaches, meaning comes not from avoiding struggle but from shouldering burdens worthy of your potential. The 7-day deliberate discomfort practice is something anyone can try. Each day choose one small discomfort voluntarily. It might be a cold shower, an extra set at the gym, or finally having that difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Document how you feel before, during, and after. You'll be amazed at how quickly your relationship with discomfort begins to change. If this video resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Share in the comments one specific discomfort you're going to voluntarily embrace this week. Putting it in writing makes it real and helps inspire others on their own journey. Remember, your greatest growth lies just beyond your comfort zone. The question isn't whether you can endure discomfort. You absolutely can. The question is, will you choose it voluntarily or wait until life forces it upon you? The path of deliberate suffering awaits. The choice as always is yours. Hey incredible growth seekers! Wow, what a journey! If this video resonated, subscribe now for more life-changing content. Join our community of self-improvers. Smash that like button to fuel more content on mindfulness, goal setting, and emotional intelligence. Share this video to create a ripple of positive change. Comment below about your growth journey. Your insights shape our content. Next week, boosting self-confidence and overcoming limiting beliefs. Don't miss it. Every interaction brings us closer to a world of empowered individuals. Let's make personal development global. Stay inspired, keep growing. Your best self awaits. Let's unlock it together.